My name is Joe Cohane. I'm the author of the new book, The Power of Strangers, The Benefits of Connecting in a Suspicious World.
We've all gotten kind of rusty talking to strangers because of COVID, but also because of our phones and just because of kind of where we are as a culture. The thing that I like to do with this show is give people something that they can try today. So give me a strategy for kind of getting back in to where it's not going to overwhelm us and feel like we have to go be friends with the world.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. First, know that everybody is anxious, right? Everybody was anxious about talking to strangers before this for a lot of reasons that I get into the book. And everyone is especially anxious now because we've just been in the hole for like a year. So start easy, start with a waiter or a waitress at a restaurant, talk to someone who's at a coffee shop, like in a kind of structured public place where your roles are clear, right? You're not just like sneaking up on someone out in the street, which I would not advise people to do. And there's a really cool technique that I learned from a woman named Georgie Nightingale, who's this communications expert in London. I took a class with her where she like taught people how to talk to strangers, and she was actually very keen and very good at it. The idea that she had was it involved scripts. So when we have an interaction with someone at like a corner store, right? You go in and you say, "How you doing?" And the person says, "Good. How are you?" And you say, "Good, thanks." And then that's it. You've put no effort into it. There's no curiosity being exercised. It's just a way to recognize that you're standing there, right? And so because it would be weird not to say anything, but you don't want to actually put any effort into it. Mm-hmm. So that's a script, and we use those all the time to conserve like cognitive load and things like that. When you find yourself in a situation like that and someone asks you a scripted question, give them a specific answer, right? So what Georgie advises and what she always does, and this is brilliant, I do it all the time, is when someone says, "How you doing?" Georgie will say, 7 out of 10, I'd say, right? Yeah. So now you've wrenched it off of the script. You're off script. You're in uncharted territory. The person's going to kind of be alert now, being like, okay, something different is happening here. I have to dial in. I have to pay attention. And then Georgie will say, "How are you doing today?" And so now she's modeled something for them. And now they have to follow her lead. And, usually they do because it's rude if you don't. You have to, this is how we communicate. And they'll say like, I'm pretty good. I'd say I'm saying about an 8 out of 10. And then she would say, "What'll it take to get you to a 9 today?"
That's beautiful.
And then they'll be like, "Well, maybe, my mother's not been feeling well. Maybe I'm going to go see her later. Maybe she'll be feeling better," something like that. And when you get to that point, you get a little glimmer of the other person. You get a glimmer of their experiences. You get a glimmer of like the depth and complexity of a person that otherwise you would never register as like a human being. It's horrible to say, but it's kind of true.
It's true, right?
People in service positions like are often dehumanized. But just a little trick like that is super useful and super easy. And it's really funny. And people I find are often kind of delighted by it. It's playful. It's kind of audacious. And you do that stuff enough and, it leads to a little 5-second interaction, but it's a nice little interaction. You'll feel kind of good after you do it.
Oh, I love it. As you've trained yourself to get off script in these interactions, do you find that you don't like it just occurs more naturally now? Like you don't have to think about, okay, I'm going to go in and like, I'm going to do the thing.
Yeah, you get more fluid. You definitely get more fluid. I mean, I was really rusty. I was anxious about doing this. It's a funny thing about being a journalist is you can be super comfortable in an interview context, but really uncomfortable about like talking to someone on a bench in a park because there's so many different variables. So I needed to build myself up again. And it was challenging to do. And it took a little while, but I had to be conscious of it. At first I had to be like, "Are you looking them in the eye? Like, look them in the eye for God's sakes. Like, why are you looking down? What are you saying? Like, how are you being perceived?" Right? Like, that's a big thing. Like, how are people responding to me? Basically rebuilding yourself as a social creature. And then just learning to listen, learning to not just Bigfoot somebody in a conversation, learning to let go a little bit, and be a little vulnerable in the sense that like, this is going to go somewhere and you don't have any control over it. Your job is to help the conversation go to where the conversation wants to go, not to like extract something that's interesting to you personally or find an opportunity to talk about yourself. And a lot of it was like, it just took training. And now I feel much more fluid. I mean, COVID screwed it up a little bit, but I've been back in the world the last few weeks. And you just get a little loose. The anxiety drops a little bit, you're still aware. You're not becoming one of those people who just like buttonholes somebody on a plane and won't leave them alone, even though they keep giving you signs telling you to stop doing this. You got to be like pretty literate in a sense. But I'm pretty comfortable with it now. And it's a joy. It's a real joy. I have a small daughter and I do it all the time with her. We talk to people all the time. We ask people questions. I just want her to be comfortable with it too.
Yeah. I was noticing the same thing, Joe, that they really are just following our lead. Mm-hmm. If we're comfortable with strangers. And now my daughter just says hi to people at the grocery store without me saying it. And it's like, it's one of my favorite things in life to witness.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, it's wonderful. And that one of the early conversations I had when I was starting this too was with Dan Rather. I was interviewing Dan Rather, and he and I were just hanging out afterwards. And if you ever have a chance to hang out with Dan Rather, hang out with Dan Rather. The guy's amazing. But we're talking about our kids, and I was like, it sounds weird, but like what I want for my daughter, who was very little at that point, I was like, I want her to be comfortable talking to strangers. It's like it's against everything that we're taught for a very long time. And he was like, I know exactly what you mean. He was like, that's what I wanted to. Like, I want them to be comfortable in the world. And when you're comfortable with this, like, it's like a passport. It's like a right to travel, it's a pathway to a really rich life.
Totally. Once again, Joe Cohane's book is called The Power of Strangers, The Benefits of Connecting in a Suspicious World. Now get out there and talk to some strangers. If you're enjoying this show, please consider leaving a rating or review on Apple Podcasts.